What do we have here, guys? We have a white woman calling a black man a racist. What we see here is a woman who's never suffered depression in her entire life, stealing the victimhood of an actual oppressed people, in this case, black men. And you guys might think this is something that is recent. You see it on YouTube all the time. I'm going to educate you on the fact that it is not. It's been happening for as long as women needed it. How long ago was that? In this case, in the 1800s. Now, I'm going to cover this fantastic post by Exercise Delicious, where he talks about the temperance movement and showing how this has been going on since then. He even says it here. When did it happen? When the Industrial Revolution pulled the physical work out of the household and moved it into the marketplace. The elite daughters of the fading New England agrarian aristocracy faced a material crisis. They had lost their traditional economic utility and their marriage market value. This is when it started. It would have started longer ago if women needed it. This is female behavior. They had absolute power in the family unit. That was fine. Now men's labor were moving out of it, right? And so they had to capture it again for themselves. To survive, they didn't launch a revolution of absolute equality. Remember, feminism has never been about equality, ever. Instead, they formed a highly organized literary and moral cartel to manufacture a brand new asset class: female moral superiority and psychological fragility. Sounds familiar? Here are the key historical players. Now, the reason why he's talking about these individuals, because he pointed out that guys get exhausted if they think that feminism is some kind of part of human nature. Well, it is part of female nature, right? But the idea of that it's amorphous and it's out there somewhere, you can't fight it. He said, no, it's an apparatus where individuals that we can point to started this. There are people we can blame, right? Now, the first one was Catherine Beecher, the high priestess of indirect power. She was the architect of separation of spheres. In her masterwork, a treatise on domestic economy, 1841, there's 1800s, guys, Beecher executed a theological inversion. She threw out the old Calvinist view that women were morally weak, replacing it with the myth that women possessed a naturally superior, pristine spiritual essence. Now, women embraced the morally weak, bullshit before the agrarian move to the marketplace. They supported this. This wasn't men holding women down. Women wanted men to think of them like this because they wanted to be taken care of in the household, right? Now it doesn't work anymore, right? In the industrial age, so they switched up. Remember, women were always the arbiters of power in every society throughout all history. Beecher explicitly opposed women's suffrage, right? And told women to stay out of politics, public politics. Why? Because she realized that by remaining an insulated angel in the home, a woman could claim total moral neutrality while leveraging intense, unfalsifiable psychological influence over the men who funded her. She taught a generation of bourgeois women how to train formal power for absolute state-enforced protection. And again, what you're seeing here is you're seeing intersectional women versus the TERFs. Why was she against suffrage? Because she, Beecher, was willing to wear a mask of I love you to her husband, who she was using. And that's what she recommended to other women. And the suffragettes were the ones who hated men so deeply they couldn't wear the mask. They're the ones who later became the TERFs. Of course, the suffragette movement came, it went along its way no matter what, Beecher said. Because again, the women who hate men so intensely, they're going to do what they're going to do, right? Again, guys, look at this. This is intersectional feminism versus TERFs way back here in the 1800s, right? And by the way, this is why I despise propaganda like the yellow wallpaper. You guys may never have heard of this. This is a horror story where a woman goes mad because her husband, imprisoned her in the hospital, right? That's how it works. This is feminist propaganda, right? But I'll get to this later. Or next, we'll look at Sarah Josepha Hale. She was born in the 1700s again, because this happened long ago, guys. Godey's Lady's Book, led by the editor, Sarah, this mid-19th century media powerhouse reached an unprecedented 150,000 subscribers, operating exactly like the high society afternoon media algorithms of today. 150,000 back then, there was no internet then, right? There was no television. So this is very popular amongst women. The product, Godey's did not just sell fashion plates. She sold a standardized class consciousness performance of female fragility. It taught middle-class women that having sensitive nervous system and suffering from languor and requiring absolute emotional deference from men was the ultimate marker of high social status. This is why I brought up the yellow wallpaper, because this is what was going on here. This propaganda piece was saying that this woman who was leeching off her husband, pretending she was just a frail little girl that needed to be taken care of, was using her husband, right? And of course, she suffered a backlash from that, right? Since the husband, not knowing how much his wife hated him and despised him, went along with it and said, hey, this is how women are. They're telling us guys they're the way they are. She is too fragile to handle reality. So I'll hospitalize her. He didn't really mean to imprison her. He just hospitalized her for her own good. And she, of course, went crazy. And of course, they're spinning it that the husband and husbands in general are bad people because they're male, right? This is what men do to women. What she was really arguing is the man should be a slave to women and give her whatever she wants. And then she can kick up and do any kind of behavior she wants. And that's what this white woman was doing when she was calling this black man a racist. She was saying, I'm female. The laws are not applied to me. I'm above the laws. The goddess is above the law. The law is for male mortals, right? The consequence, they successfully transformed a woman's emotional comfort from a private marital dynamic into a high-value, socially recognized asset that men were culturally obligated to finance. There you go. This is a start where men in general were looking after women in general. It wasn't just, oh, my husband is looking after me. No, all men were enslaved, right? Now, the abolitionist proxy, Harriet Beecher Stowe. Stowe was the author of Uncle Tom's Cabin way back in 1852. Now, she hear the 1800s a lot, guys. The Blueprint, well, celebrated as an anti-slavery text, Uncle Tom cabin subtly operated as a massive vehicle for the innate moral superiority of the female gender and white maternal dominance. White maternal dominance. These women were part of this movement for Black people were actually racist. The suffragette movement teamed up with the KKK. All these Black men were merely fodder for these white women to gain power. They actually didn't care about them whatsoever, right? Stowe argued that the economic system of slavery was uniquely masculine, market-driven, materialist evil. See, so these women who, all these rich bourgeois women who lived off the plantation of Black men's labor, they, of course, want to separate themselves from it and say, no, 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 we were just forced. We were just forced by our evil husbands to make these men work for us. A complete lie, right? Now, the value proposition, to counter it, she didn't just argue for Black liberation. She positioned the Christian home and the paternal white woman as the ultimate supreme moral authority, capable of purifying the nation. So Black men, how can you be liberated when you're under the thumb of the white woman? She used the horrific reality of slavery as a proxy to argue that men's public systems, politics, commerce, and law, were inherently corrupt, and that society could be only saved if it was submitted to the moral sensibility of women. So you see, men are bad. Put the power in women's hands. Now, fun fact, this moral repositioning was essential for women nominating themselves as more appropriate leaders of colonial projects. So all the time these women were supporting the Black liberation, they were actually against it, and extended other colonial project conflicts such as that of South Africa with concentration camps in the Boer War. See, at home, we're going to pretend, these women are going to pretend they're on Black men's side while enslaving foreign Black men. Positioning yourself with the minority groups or actually oppressed is a tactic that feminists do today with gay people, Black people, etc., as a means to siphon some sort of political legitimacy. They are thrown out when inconvenient. Tokens are spent. And we see it here, guys, don't we? Right? See, these women pretended in the 60s to be for Black liberation. And as soon as these Black men are now arresting women when they're criminals, they're inconvenient. And now they're the racist. You can't do this to me, you Black man. You're beneath me. I'm female. No laws apply. Now, by the way, I'm not going to read all this because it would make the video too long. I'll put this in the description box for you guys to read. It's important education. But we're going to go a little further. The father of temperance, Lyman Beecher. You hear the name Beecher show up a lot, don't you? Lyman Beecher, who was Catherine's father, of course, was universally considered one of the primary fathers of the temperance movement in America. Lyman is a literal bridge to the frontier colonization. He authored a massively influential text called The Plea for the West in 1835, still 1800s, right? In it, he argued that American West was a spiritual battlefield. This colonization project, there's that perfect word, right? It's colonizing, is tied to the moral panic narratives and divorce laws that were afforded to women. When they say moral panic, it's not a panic and it's not moral. It's an immoral power grab. So whenever you hear that term, moral panic, understand it's an immoral power grab. By marketing marriage more appealing to women, more families could be born as a means to civilize the land, right? So in other words, these guys wanted to colonize the West, and they had to basically bribe women to go out west. Why would women who are in charge in the East bother going out west? Well, of course, he had to appeal to them by giving them more power, right? Mary Hanchett Hunt, the institutional brainwasher. If Catherine Beecher wrote the software, Hunt was the one who hard coded it into the brains of every child in the United States. Remember, all fascists go for the children, right? That's why the Nazis went after the children. That's why the church tried to get church put into public schools. The only difference between them and the feminists were so much more successful. The role, she was the superintendent of the scientific temperance instruction department. Wow, scientific. Of the Women's Christian Temperance Union. The threat narrative. Hunt recognized that adults could resist pamphlets, so she targeted the school systems. See, this is why we have to kick the feminists out of the school system. They got into it in the 1800s. They're still here today. She successfully lobbied the state legislatures to make temperance education mandatory in every public school. So notice people rightfully kicked prayer out of school as something mandatory, but they still allow the feminists to spew their man-hatred to little boys. The propaganda, she forced publishers to rewrite biological textbooks to include absolute fictions. Sound familiar? Yes. Her textbooks taught that that a single drop of alcohol would permanently burn a hole in their stomachs, cause their blood to turn to water, and inevitably transform their fathers, not their mothers, right, into violent, slavering maniacs who'd murder them in their sleep. She raised two entire generations of Americans to view masculine social behavior as literal biological threat to national survival. Now, this is how disgusting this is. These women don't go for the other men over there. It's not enough for them to say the black man shouldn't have the vote. They're targeting the men who are intimate in their lives. That's how much women love men. Again, the yellow wallpaper, what is it? It's propaganda against the man who loves you unconditionally. Right? That's what's going on here. And notice why the temperance movement, when it stopped alcohol, it was very temporary, wasn't it? You know why? Because women love getting drunk and kicking up their heels as much as men do. And that's why it didn't last. I'm guaranteeing you guys that if drinking was strictly a male thing, the temperance movement would have been successful today. Liquor stores wouldn't be allowed today. Matter of fact, what's going on here? There was no video games and there was no online pornography, right? So they didn't need to go after that. That's what they're going after today. What did they go back then? Coffee houses and drinking establishments, because again, they were outlets for men. They were sources of contentment for men, and women want to stop that out of sadism. Now, Frances Willard, totalitarian strategist. She was longtime president of the WCTU and arguably the most powerful political organizer in American history. She explicitly tied the threat narrative directly to state dominance. The do everything policy. Willard took a simple anti-alcohol club and transformed it into a multi-tiered political cartel. Her motto was do everything. See, psychotic sadist. They want power over everything. They're not, they don't, they're not like you and me. They don't want to just live and let live and live a good life. They're not capable of that, right? They want dominance over everybody. She argued that the project to protect the home from the predatory male, women needed to control everything, right? Prison, reform, education, labor laws, and the police, right? Willard was the master of using home protection to argue to expand state police powers. This is why I laugh when women say defund the police. The police are their attack dogs. They'd never defund them. She told politicians that if the state did not grant women the vote and the power to police the community, the frontier would collapse into savage anarchy. She successfully weaponized the illusion of female vulnerability to secure massive funding for state surveillance, prison houses for deviant men. Remember, it's us guys who are deviant, right? Women with their dark fantasy romances that involved rape and bestiality and incest. You know, they're not the deviants. We're the deviants. Right? And the total bureaucratic framework that modern family courts still use to modern male behavior today. And they're still trying to do that, guys. They're trying to get facial recognition, right? They're trying to get guys to dox themselves to enjoy their pleasures. That way they can turn around and use them against us and say, this man, he's into this. He's a deviant. Imprison him. For example, they created the Department of Social Purity. This department, if you dig a little deeper, was involving the WCTU, agents inside local police department, courts, and municipal boards, right? Now, this is the most important thing, which I'm going to end off because I don't want this video to be too long. Francis pushed for police matrons, right? Female prison guards. She launched a massive state-by-state legislation blitz demanding that municipal police departments hire police matrons. Virtuous middle-class women would hold exclusive custody over the rest of women or juveniles. See, so boys who can't defend themselves, right? They want control over them, right? Because what was happening, the jails were putting the women and men in together, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. They're all criminals, right? The men and women are equal under the law. And she's the one who got separate privileges for women so that women could look after them and treat the female criminals much better than they would the male criminals. Understand that? By convincing the state to build separate specialized reformatories to rehabilitate women, not imprison women, right? Not to punish women, rehabilitate them. The standard harsh punitive state prison system that was left as an apparatus designed almost exclusively for the punishment and forced labor of men. The state hard-coded a system where decriminalization of women received therapeutic maternal rehabilitation, while criminalized men received raw carceral punishment. Do you understand what this is about? These women have been working at this forever. And we see that here today. Because if you notice, these police body cams, you'll see it continually. You'll see these men arrest these criminal women, and instead of putting them into the car right away, they have to stop, call a female prison guard, or female police officer, to come to pat these women down, wasting taxpayers' dollars, but more importantly, telling everybody, I, as a policeman, is beneath this female criminal. There's absolutely nothing wrong with these men patting these women down in case they have weapons. Nothing wrong with it. And these men went along with their oppression. These men are being oppressed. right now by this woman by having to call up a female officer to say, I am not worthy to touch my goddess. She is so beneath me. She can commit crime. She can be a complete psychopathic criminal. And I am not allowed to touch her because I'm a male beneath her. And this is something that has to stop. As a men's rights activist, I'd be going after this as a beginning to say male police officers are allowed to touch females, period, because they are not above us. Now, again, I'm going to stop reading here because this goes on for a long, long time. I know videos, guys don't really watch the whole thing. So I'm going to put this in the description box, and it's a fantastic education for men. Remember, what you see here has been going on since the 1800s. And it would have been going on earlier than that if women needed it to. Because, again, when did it start? When did it actually start? I'll show you right here. It started when the Industrial Revolution pulled physical work out of the household and moved it into the marketplace. So if the Industrial Revolution happened earlier, then what you're seeing here now would have happened earlier. It's that simple. This is female nature. Feminism comes for women. The contempt they have for men is innate at the very beginning of humanity. And it shows up when certain things happen. Right? Thank you again. Exercise delicious. I appreciate your post. You're the best poster on our Reddit. Anyway, we'll end it here.